my name is Laurel Tien, and I'm one of the co-editors of the journal. I'm really excited to be here in terms of how we're living holistic education and privileging that. So I'll pass it over to Paul.
Wow, you were so succinct. Yeah, we're having so much fun, this editorial team. We really are enjoying the process as well as honoring the service that we hope to provide for this community. My background is I'm a classroom teacher. I'm a K-6 teacher, and also rather serious about holistic education. And we will tell a little bit of the history of the journal and how we got involved in this new incarnation of an old friend. So I'll be succinct too. I'll stop there.
All right. May we be such in our editorials.
Yes.
I'm Renee Owen. I'm a professor at Southern Oregon University. Part of the reason I was drawn there is because of the Center for Holistic Teaching and Learning that is there. Previously, I had been a practitioner in schools, and I had met Paul at a conference that we had at Rainbow Community School, where I was head of school. We had a conference there on holistic learning, 3 different conferences. And I was very surprised, well, maybe not that surprised, when he called me in the summer of 2020, as I was starting here at Southern Oregon University and taking on the role of learning how to be a professor. That they say it's like drinking out of a fire hose, and it was, especially during COVID. And he said, "Hey, you want to take on something else? The Holistic Education Newsletter. Leaders are retiring, and they've asked me and Laurel Tien to take it over and be editors." And I said, "Sure, I'll do one more thing." And boy, am I glad I said yes. It has just been such a fun journey. And I know I was just supposed to introduce myself. Everybody else was concise, and now I'm not being concise. I've started launching.
All good.
It's really how we roll in our editorial meetings. They're very informal, and we just all agreed that we're only going to do this if it's fun. And if we're building our relationships with one another throughout the process. And that's exactly what it's been. It's been incredibly organic. And it seems like everything that we've needed has just arisen as it's needed. And it's been such an organic process. We've just sort of made decisions as they come along. And if things have presented themselves, that the journal is unfolding organically. And that's partly why we wanted to have this visioning session, is to find out what our collective vision for this journal is and can be, and to hear your thoughts and views and see what synchronicity, what arises out of that together, as well as to inform what are some ways that you can get involved and being involved, get published, for instance. And so let's just enjoy this time together. Laurel.
Awesome. Thanks, Renee. So what, just to riff off of what Renee was saying there, that what we were hoping to do today was to provide a brief history of the Holistic Education Review as it stands right now, speak a little bit to our mandate, give you a little bit of a tour of the Open Journal site and how you might submit something or encourage a colleague to submit something. We'll do some visioning and answer any questions that you might have. I think one of the things that we were really excited to be able to do was to highlight any of you who are interested in sharing your presentations with this fall issue of the journal, so we can say a bit more about that as well. Yeah, so I think we wanted to start with just a really short centering exercise. And I'm just going to pass it over to you,
Paul. So I'm so sorry, but I'm in a spot that I've sought out so that my internet connection would be strong, and instead it's unstable. So bear with me. Was the invitation to lead the centering part?
Yes.
Laurel? Oh.
Yeah, just a short one.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I want to do this, which is perhaps will center some of us. It's more of a story, short. I was driving home last night. So I work at a small independent school that I helped to found 20 years ago. It's about a half-hour drive from my school to my home. And on an island in North Puget Sound. On the way home, it was dusk. And I don't know if others of you saw this last night, what your sky view is like, but last night there was this magnificent waxing crescent moon low on the horizon. And at that time where I am, the sky was this incredible modulated, gradiated progression from the orange of the sun of the horizon to the deep blue of the night sky. And about 10 degrees off from this amazing 6% crescent was Venus. Bright. Now, if you didn't see this, just imagine, because it was like, you know, out of a dream. And then there's a meteor shower. And after I got home, I looked it up. It's the Draconid meteor shower. And just magical. And on my drive home, picture this. Mountain background, old growth forest, reaching towards the crescent moon and Venus low on the horizon. Incredible colors. Brings you to tears. And I stopped the car and I got out. Which you never do. I never do. And I was thinking today about people all over the world. I know we have folks from Malaysia and from Thailand. We all have access to that gift. And so I'm planting a seed and inviting you to look up tonight. And that's how I'll start us off.
We can ring our a bell to just bring us home to magnificence.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Renee. Whew. I think where we wanted to start was, again, Renee started us on this path about talking a little bit about the Holistic Education Review and how this reincarnation started and pulling on the Holistic Educator Newsletter. What we also wanted to do was to just screen share our advisors, to introduce you to our advisors, and a shout out to know that Marnie's here. Wasn't sure if anybody else from our advisory board is here. And so Renee is sharing the Open Journal site. And the reason why we wanted to just kind of give you a tour of that is because it shows, or just to kind of give you an opportunity to look around. The Open Journal system feels a little different than the Holistic Educator Newsletter, in the sense that it's definitely more sort of formal looking. But on there, we have the history, we have the format. You can access all the issues, and we've also been putting up the issues of the Holistic Educator that we have, and also the previous encounter articles. But what Renee is showing you is, maybe we could go to the advisors tab, which I think is under about.
Is it
Maybe there?
I'm
I
not
wonder if
seeing it shouldn't be editorial. Oh, yeah, it's under editorial team. So
Okay.
it's our advisory board. And we had the page that had everybody's photos. Is that here somewhere too?
So that would be on the SOU link as well.
Okay. I could
Yeah.
go there as well. I'll work on that.
So you can notice as we scroll through the names and oh, thanks, John is putting that up. So it's on the Center for Holistic Education site.
Do you want to? Oh, thanks. I forgot that it was there. Yeah, so there are really two websites, which is a little funny because we have, it's part of the Holistic Education Review is now part of the Center for Holistic Education at SOU. And so we have a page there on SOU Center for Holistic Education site, and that's what I now have up. And on that page is that page has a little bit more flexibility than the actual journal site. The journal site is set up according to open journal systems, and it's a little more rigid, because that's the publication essentially. Whereas on the SOU Holistic Education Review site, we have more flexibility, and that's why we're actually able to have the photos, for instance, for our advisors here. And so it's a little more dynamic. And so thank you for sharing this, John. I forgot those photos were there. And some of you will know some of these folks. Paudel, who's the Minister of Education in Bhutan, or was the first democratically elected Minister of Education. So they've been working on now I'm forgetting my words.
Maybe I'll just jump in and mention a couple of things. So you'll see that really these advisors, we're just so honored to have these advisors aboard, because we really see as the advisors having planted the seeds and are continuing to plant the seeds, tilling the soil, and that we're really the three of us as editors are really stewarding and really living into this mandate about diversifying what holistic education is about, and intentionally listening for voices that are not being heard or trying to be heard within this context. So we've been really intentional about how we've invited our board, our advisory board together. Also on this page is, I think it was more at the top.
Want me to go back?
Yeah, just right there, actually. So we have, if you want to actually go straight to the journal site, you can do it from this site as well. Or if you want to be a peer reviewer, then there's some forms to fill out as well. Well, there should be a link. Yeah, there we go. And that brings us back to that.
Brings us to the site. And it brings us to the about page.
Yeah. So there's also a link on there that says want to be emailed when a new issue is coming out. So it won't automatically email you when a new issue is coming out. So if you're interested in getting an email about that, then you can click there. Thank you, Renee. So what a really important part of this for us to continue into this diversifying and nourishing a diverse approach is that we wanted to follow through with our roots in both of the areas in terms of having a newsletter support that looks at perhaps more community-based articles, as well as this more scholarly peer review section. So you'll notice that we've got actually, if you stop right there, it talks a bit about that we publish conversations, we publish articles or scholarly papers, community voices, media reviews, and events and announcements. So in that way, it's an attempt to really include a diverse group of voices in the journal itself by having some peer reviewed and some invited and more focused on applications and practice. I'll just pause there for a moment and see if my co-editors want to add anything, or if anybody has any questions so far.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and please stop me if I'm too unstable. So just to be clear, I think just don't want to, I don't know, presume that everyone knows these things. So there were two streams that are merging with this incarnation of the journal. One was the Holistic Educator Newsletter that Jack started, and that was in recent years stewarded by Gary Babiuk and Susan Schiller, who some of you will know from previous conferences. And they dutifully sent out the biannual newsletter, holding the community together and sharing news and events and gatherings and publications for years. Separate from that, as others of you will know, starting back in 1988, Ron Miller launched the original Holistic Education Review. And that became a quarterly scholarly journal, and was eventually, after a few years, handed off to a different editorial team, including Bill Crane. I just think it's important to invoke the lineage a little bit, because these people were really important in establishing holistic education as a legitimate field of study and scholarship. Bill Crane and his partner, Charlie Giacchella. They changed the name of the journal to Encounter: Education for Meaning and Social Justice. A number of people here at the conference served on as a contributing editor or on the editorial board for Encounter. Encounter went from a print journal to a dual platform journal. It published for a while on CDs, remember when they were a thing? And then eventually folded. When we were given the opportunity to take the reins of the Holistic Educator Newsletter, we also felt in our own hearts, were encouraged by peers to think about bringing back the more scholarly component that was left by Encounter, by the original Holistic Ed Review. So we're back. Ron's back with us as a team member. Jack's with us as a team member and supporter, and a number of other wonderful folks. So this is it. So we've put out one issue, and we're in the process of collecting submissions, as Laurel said, for our fall issue, which we'll publish in December. We've got plenty, but there's room for a couple more, probably. We have a themed issue coming up in the spring, and we're off and running. So that's just a little more background about the journal. Renee or Laurel, do you want to jump in, or I have one more quick thing?
No, go ahead. I'm glad that we backed up and shared the history, that because I think, like you said, that lineage is important, because there was already this rich community there, and we really enjoyed, as an editorial team, having the freedom to explore and be creative about what this journal could be, and then also to find the support from these people that are on board that Paul mentioned, Ron giving us his blessing to call it the Holistic Education Review, Jack being excited that it was going to continue, people sharing their mailing list from the Holistic Education Newsletter and other mailing lists, so that we already had a sizable mailing list and community of people who were interested.
Yeah, and big picture, you know, these conferences like this weekend's are so important for us to get together and sort of coagulate the goo into something more like concrete. We're all out there practicing on our own to some extent. Some of us more on our own than others, it feels like. And events like the conference are so important for us to develop a unified vision, a sense of community, of real understanding and common purpose. But they happen very sporadically. And the role the journal hopes to fill, and did fill in its previous incarnations, was one of keeping the momentum going, keeping us unified, keeping us together, keeping us curious and stimulated with one another's research, ideas, reflections, and experiences, right? So I dug back and found an article that Ron wrote and published in a journal called The Teacher Education Quarterly in 1992. And he was reflecting on the Holistic Ed Review's first few years. And he noticed that the journal founded the same year as Jack Miller's Holistic Curriculum book. And he says in this article, this is Ron Miller's piece, he says, John P. Miller of the Ontario Institute for the Studies in Education published his book, The Holistic Curriculum, and volume 1, number 1 of the journal Holistic Education Review made its appearance that same year. The review tapped into a dissident education community that was ready for such a catalyst. Through this journal, numerous teachers, parents, and scholars have discovered that they are not alone in their educational convictions. In recent years, person-centered educators have been buffeted by the tide of reform efforts that followed A Nation at Risk. Some of us will remember that. Not so much the tide of mediocrity, of which that report warned, but a tide of technicism, reductionism, conservative political and corporate agendas for education. Romantic, progressive, humanistic, and holistic educators found a forum in the HER for expressing their dissident views in all their diversity. They soon realized that a network of like-minded educators existed around the world. And then he goes on to talk about the Chicago Gathering and various other antecedents to this movement. So again, just think we need to take a moment and say thank you and realize this is the role we're hoping we might step back into for this community to keep us together.
So before opening this up just a little bit more, as the three of us began meeting, we took the time again to enjoy each other and also to enjoy our imaginations of what this could be. What was the calling? What was needing to emerge? And as Paul said, we felt that there was a calling to bring back and merge the scholarly aspects from the Historical Education Review and Encounter with the Holistic Newsletter. And then there was also a calling to recognize that the journal, so we decided it was going to be a journal, that it would be more accessible to more people And so I'll have Laurel talk about what it means to be a part of the Public Knowledge Project, that it's an open access journal, free. You do not have to be a part of a university to access it for free. You do not need to pay for copies. But part of our mission was to make holistic education more accessible to more people, that ultimately any child who would benefit from holistic education, that's sort of the dream, would have access to it. And how could the journal be in service to that goal? And with that in mind, we crafted a mission and a vision that we hope to continue to evolve. And that's part of what we're hoping from our advisory council that gathers now twice a year. Our first gathering was in June. In January coming up, we'll be really sitting with our mission and vision and working with that. What can we envision? What's calling us? And so to begin with, our mission for the Holistic Education Review is to enhance and broaden the scholarship of holistic education, as mentioned. Also to lift up diverse and emerging voices in holistic education practice. Diverse voices is really important here. And I'll speak more to that in just a moment. Emerging voices. So again, we don't want it to just be scholarly. We want that, brand new students even to be writing for the journal. And I mean, elementary students, as well as college students, as well as young emerging practitioners and young emerging scholars. And then, as Paul spoke to continue to connect the holistic community. And so the vision to begin with is we envision a holistic educational movement that's embedded in K-12 and higher education systems as a diverse and as a unifying force dedicated to well-being and to uplifting the human spirit. The diverse piece of this is incredibly important to us. And the first journal article, which you can find under the current tab, which I will now select on the journal page, so here it is, volume 1, number 1 from May. The editorial theme was broadening the circle of holistic education practice. And part of what this is about is recognizing that diversity in a few different ways. One is that there is a holistic movement underway that isn't necessarily calling itself that. As we see everything that really kicked off with A Nation at Risk, and then moving into No Child Left Behind, and the delays in seeing how that system has affected us and the failures of it on so many levels: societal, cultural, environmental. And in the midst of that, at a grassroots level, what has risen up are so many movements that look like different movements to some people. There's a mindfulness movement. There's a social emotional movement. There's recognizing trauma and trauma-informed practices as a movement. There's a restorative practices movement. There's a place-based education movement, an environmental education movement, a nature-based movement. And part of the point of this first editorial is, hey, when you look at all of these together, it's starting to look together like one holistic education movement. And can our journal be a force for recognizing that we can bring these together and create a force and a movement that works together? So there's the bringing diverse voices together and unifying them in one way. And the other aspect is a critical analysis of our holistic movement as it stands. We actually had trouble finding speakers for the conference who were not of middle-aged or older male white speakers. This movement has largely, in a scholarly level, been founded by white males who are wonderful, who we love and adore. And those are the people who have had the privilege to work at a scholarship level on holistic education, as well as to found schools where holistic education could take hold, largely private schools, because holistic education, especially that honors outwardly the human spirit, hasn't been very accessible in public schools. So by nature of necessity, it has been somewhat a pedagogy of privilege, which was another one of the articles, never intending for it to be. And that it's time for us to recognize that, and intentional social justice work doesn't happen by accident and needs to be intentional. So an intentional critique of ourselves and an effort to broaden the circle by recognizing the diverse voices, faces, cultures, races, classes, gender, religion, all of the diverse voices that can be and will be a part of this movement. So there's that. And then Laurel, if you want to tell us about the open journal aspect of it, and then let's do some visioning.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just really briefly, the open journal system is, so we have 4 partners who have chipped in to pay the yearly fee of $850. So that would be the TIES program, that would be Antioch University, the Transformative Learning Foundation, and of course the Holistic, Center for Holistic Education, and just really excited to be able to partner with that and keep things at a grassroots collaborative level. The open journal system allows for, as Renee says, anybody to access the journal, and with no fee, don't have to go through university. So it is accessible to everyone. And as we mentioned, we do have some of the previous incarnations of our of this journal list or on the archived sections of the website. So if there's a couple of ways to submit. One is that if you're interested in a peer review, so that we do have peer reviewers that will do a blind review, a double blind review, that you're able to do it that way. If you're interested in submitting a story, so something that would still be, I know I'll argue, considered scholarly, but you don't necessarily want it to go through a peer review process, then you can just send it to myself, Paul, or Renee. And we really are appreciating that part. Oh, here's the invited articles.
So this is what they're about and submissions. And this has been set up in a fairly classical manner for a journal. And so this is more oriented toward people who want the scholarly recognition and to have a peer review article submitted and reviewed. But as Laurel said, you can also just email one of us if you have an article that you're not interested in being a peer review article, but simply being published as part of the community feature of the journal.
I mean, at this point in time, we really want to spend time hearing your ideas. So based on if you have any questions about the kinds of things that the 3 of us have shared, any questions of submission, but mostly we want to hear about your vision. How can we take this and lean into this vision and mandate that we put forth? So we're okay with silence. Just feel free to hop in whenever.
Oh, I hop in. I always just hop in.
Oh, good.
Hi, nice to meet you, Laurel. I know Paul and Renee. So we just to throw this into the pot quickly, we at the Center for HTL, you know, us guys putting on this, we've been talking about how we can actually integrate and have the journal as sort of the written word, and over on our website, how can we on our website support you more so that we have more modalities. So yes, we have podcast, and yes, we're going to have some visual, and yes, but how so thinking forward, you know, how can that integrate in a way that points to you with greater emphasis? How can that work? That's it. Bye.
Hi, Cam. Hug. You know, it's just for me, it's just feels so good. For a while, we didn't know if we would get hosted and we were going to do the open journal thing anyway, but it feels really good to have a home at a university who understands holistic practice in this field. I stumbled into your podcast and other things you guys are doing, and it's all good. I think it's great. I mean, I feel like we do have a presence on the SOU and specifically the HTLC web pages. It's easy to move back and forth. Yeah, I mean, just to recognize what you're already doing. There's nothing I've been wishing that SOU would do to.
No. I just want to forward the notion.
Yeah.
And I want to introduce John King, who
Yeah.
is our division chair at SOU. And John, I know that we've been taught, Renee and John and I do sort of this leading towards HTL. So John, if you could speak a couple words here. I think you have reticence, but we want to hear those. I want to hear your ideas in this.
Well, thanks for the invitation. And yeah, I mean, my intention coming here was initially, and still is somewhat, really just to listen and to hear from kind of the wider community what the vision is, to then figure out, well, what can we do to better support that in all its different forms. You know, so that's one part of what's going on in my mind is just to, you know, honor that and be responsive. At the same time, I can't help, you know, the creativity piece of my mind is sparking when I read, particularly when I think about the vision and mission that are so beautifully and eloquently communicated through the journal, the notion of the movement, right? And the need for continuous connection and support and dialogue and connection between all these various voices. And so it gets me to think, you know, if we think about the journal as a piece of that connective tissue between us all, right? And when we think about a center for holistic teaching and learning, that physically is located at SOU, but it's really, you know, as we're experiencing and as we're doing more, you know, virtual connections, a center doesn't need to only have a physical presence in one place. And so, you know, I'm just really curious about, you know, the interface between a center, a journal, and a community that, you know, should be able to foster and support that movement in really powerful ways that I suspect we're only kind of scratching the surface of. And so I don't have an answer to that, but I have a longing to hear and flesh that out and then be able to come in and think about, okay, well, what does it take to support that broader vision, not just of a center, not just of a journal, but of a movement of which those are all connected pieces. So over to you, flesh that, tell me what to, you know, so that's the invitation really. And
I see
I'd love to hear that.
Michael's actually has a hand up, and I'm wondering if Michael has a response to that. And John, that was just so beautifully said, and I just really appreciate your like double emphasis on, yes, we see this not as a journal, like I love how you called it a connective tissue, but yes, as a vehicle for a movement. It plays a part in a movement, and what other ideas and our creativity and imagination do we have to spawn that? Michael, I'm wondering what you have to say.
Thanks, Renee. Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone. Well, that sounded like this is going to sound a little bit like a setup, John. I think, you know, fastball right down the middle of the plate. But my response would be to, it won't come as a surprise, I don't think, to Paul or Laurel to hear this, you know, advocacy on my part, and that is to create a social media presence for this. If this is a truly a movement as you described it, and I agree with that, and then I think the obvious an obvious container to help spark and prime conversation, presence, connectivity to these ideas, and to the living living sense of these ideas is a social media presence that complements a journal that's published. Your plans are to publish it twice a year. So I've been priming and sparking online communities for many years, some more successful than others. Most recent expression of this was through the organization that Laurel and Paul have both been participants in as well. And starting last year, I helped pioneer a new iteration with new tools, social media tools, through an app called Circle. And it is a social media app. And, no question, we prove a concept that this was a much more viable way of sparking conversation and exchange than something like Canvas. That it much more resembled a social media space like, sorry to use the word, Facebook, and without the toxicity and baggage of Facebook. But I would just leave off there to say, I think that is it's a low hanging fruit to be considered without a big price tag on it. Really, I don't believe. But I want to connect more regularly, more systematically, habitually than twice a year. I was a pioneering subscriber to Whole Earth Review many years ago. I often hold that up as an example of something that was a container for a movement, and we didn't have social media at that time. I waited, I yearned for my subscription to be shoved through the door or into my mailbox, and I felt connected to that community. And I think that this is an opportunity to really spark this in new expanded ways. Thank you.
Marnie, I see that your hand is up. Michael, thank you for those comments before Marnie speaks. I feel a lot of energy as you speak of that and excitement. And, it helps me personally frame the review, her more as, I don't want to say the official voice of the movement, because we are not that presumptuous, but sort of a vehicle for people to frame it and provide instruction and philosophy. And then the social media piece would actually be what really connects the community and broadens it. And I just want to share that part of what SOU, Southern Oregon University, has offered the journal is we have a student worker that they're paying for, who has a lot more skills with social media than any of us do. And that is actually part of the vision that we're hoping for, is that once the conference is over and once the fall issue is out, that is the task that they might be put to, is what would that look like? Could a student start and maintain some sort of a social media unit? And so before Marnie, real quick, before I get to you and Kelly, Michael, would the student be able to get some advice from you or technical help?
Absolutely. Love to explore the notions further with anyone who's interested.
Great. Okay, Marnie, and then Kelly.
Just quickly, I think what Michael's also talking about would feed into what I brought up this morning about mentorship. The fact that we need to bring in these new young teachers, students, scholars. I've been pushing this. I've been trying to talk about this for a while, and it's a challenge. But I think because of social media, I think we have a really wonderful opportunity in opening space here to bring people on board and then nurture them. I mean, we really have to. Jack said we're not all going to be out forever, hopefully for a little while longer. But I think it's really important. The other thing that I raised, I think at our first advisory meeting, and it's going to take a while to get the platform organized, and I know that, was there's a huge artistic art education community out there, always looking for ways to publish work, but publish work in really unique ways. And I think we could be cutting edge in this particular place, because we can We can do color images. We could put in, videos. I think of Celeste Snowbur and some of the incredible dance stuff she's putting on Instagram and work she's doing, and videotaping things. I think we have a really interesting opportunity to broaden what holistic education is. And so many of those people are also really connected to spirituality and the arts. And I know this will take time with the platform, but if we have a social media venue, then that would also allow for these people to possibly post the work that they're doing that may not get posted anywhere else. So that's all I really wanted to comment on.
Great.
Thank you.
Exciting energy and ideas. And Kelly. Oh, you're on mute still.
Well, I want to applaud you and everything that you're doing. And already it seems like you have a vision to begin with. And also thank you for inviting us to contribute to that. And I'm excited to hear the diversity of ideas that are coming out of this group thus far. And as I teach students and in spirituality and education and various other places, I'm excited to know that I can actually say to them, there's a place to submit your work. And now that is possible that you be mentored into the process of being a scholar in this field. And I really think that is revolutionary for this field. It's not that it didn't happen before, but it also begs the question, what is our dream or idea or theory of what a holistic education scholar is? And, what is this scholarly work? And now we see all these fields, as Marnie mentioned, and others that can feed into that. But I guess I have a question. It sounds like I'm just making a lot of statements. I guess my question is, having worked in a serious journal previously, I know the review system can be difficult. It can be emotional. You can feel rejected. This is a small field, so you're gonna maybe even know some of your reviewers. And I just want to know if there's a growing idea of how to develop that reflects the principles of holistic education.
Wow, Kelly, you just went right to the heart of one of the emerging issues that we're trying to sort out right now. And I think, Marnie, do you want to speak to that or do something new? Because I'll share just also that so far what we found is, yes, we have this like vision and this ethos of inclusivity. And some of the articles that have been submitted, transparently share this for peer review, we found were not quite suitable for that at that scholarly level. And thank goodness we have this other aspect of the journal that's more community level and practitioner level. And so we were able to just sort of move them over to that section, which was nice, instead of reject people, and then also provide some feedback, but openly with like, hey, here I am, here's my name, I'm an editor. This isn't going to be part of the anonymous peer reviewed journal, part of the journal. We're going to put this in community and working with people a little bit too, with their articles for the little time that we have, we're
Right.
Marnie, did you have something to speak to that?
Yeah, there's the way of doing reviews and there's a way of not doing reviews. And I think some of us here have had a combination of both. And I had one recently that I was horrified at and sent it to a colleague, and she just said, it was shocking. Anyway, but one of the things I think we could do is we could come up, or the advisory board or whoever, the group of us could come up with maybe some guidelines for doing scholarly reviews, so that that we actually practice holistic scholarly reviews, so that we actually have heart when we do them, so that we don't start out trashing people, which is so common in the field of academia, and that we actually start off with what is good about the piece. For example, what are some of the things that are strong, and then from there you move into what you need to improve on, if there needs to be improvement. There are ways to gently bring people to where they need to be. And I'm not, and it's hard and it's not easy, but I think that there's enough people sitting around this table, and Kelly, yourself included, that have been through this process that could come up with some very concrete, scholarly, holistic practices around reviews that could be put in as guidelines. Very often when I've been asked to review chapters, they ask me to, they give a bit of guidance in terms of what they're looking for in terms of the reviews. So maybe there needs to be a vision about the kinds of reviews that we're asking for. And also to really, I think if we want new scholars, then we've got to bring them in. And if they need to do major revisions, then we need to work with them if that's what it's going to take. So that's where we might be a little different than the standard scholarly piece and reviews that we see out there. So I'm not sure how people feel about that, but I think there's ways. Pat Thompson from the UK actually talks about how to do reviews and how you start off with the positives. You just don't go in for the jugular, which is so common in academia, which I'm usually appalled at. So I don't submit to places that do that.
Yeah, that's so great. And it reminds me so much of what Renee was talking about yesterday in her session on sociocracy as a holistic model for governance, whereas the well-meaning, humanistic, organizational leader plopped into or wrenched into a hierarchical dominator model of governance is miserable and wants for that human connection and the partnership and the collaboration, and there's just no room for it. And there we are already feeling at the HER that tension between wanting to be a real journal and having blind peer reviews. Well, if you're blindly reviewing, what I want is to talk to the person who wrote this piece and like have some interchange and share some ideas back and forth. And have you considered that maybe, and have you read this piece yet? Because it might inform your dialogue, and there's just, it feels like we're inheriting the system and we're reinventing the system. But that, is going to take some time and mindfulness and mentoring from those who have little glimpses into a more holistic way to do scholarly publishing. Because it is brutal. It's brutal,
So you guys, I need to point out that it's time. And so I do want to say Emily that Renee was referring to just texted me and said she wished she was here. So that would be the student. He'll be working with the journal. And lastly, I would like to say, Marnie, I think it was you. I personally would love to have posted in her, and here's what we want for this section, and here's what we want for this section. That would be, I think that would relieve a lot of people and say, oh, I can write it this way or this way, just from a personal place. Thank you very much, you all. I have to run over to Touchstone. See you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, the touchstones are starting. Thank you, everybody. I'm the host of this session, and so I can keep the room open a little bit if anybody else has anything that they want to share or questions that you want to ask, and then we'll move over to and then I'll close the room. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Being part of this.
I want to echo that as well.
Maybe I just jump in to say, if people aren't watching the chat, I just put in a little anecdote that I did submit an article to the HER in June and for a blind review, and it came back with the highest kind of support I've ever experienced in reviewing. I used to work in journalism, and that doesn't get darker and more aggressive than in a journalist newsroom, except maybe in blind peer reviews. So you're already achieving that in what you just espoused to my perception and in my experience. So I really value that, and I certainly wanted to recognize that.